Hi, everybody. I am Sarah Beth Burke, and I am so excited for my discussion today with Karen Catlin. We are talking all about how to be seen and valued in the workplace for who you really are. And a lot of that has to do with allyship. And who better to bring in this topic than Karen? I'm thrilled that she is here to give her expertise. If you're not familiar about me and what I'm up to, I am a professional identity researcher. So that means I really look at what do you call yourself in your work? What is that identity you have that is not just your job title, not just the things you do, but it's what you see yourself as. So maybe you do marketing, but you call yourself a storyteller. Those types of identities tend to get hidden and we disregard them. And my work that I focus on is actually who we are at the intersection of multiple identities, because there's something happening when you wear a lot of hats. That term has just become generic and minimizes who you are. So I help people name and celebrate. And in order for us to be seen, we need allies who are talking about us, leveraging our gifts, and really not not just displacing and discounting the fact that people that are sitting at the table are so much more than what they seem to be. So, Karen, welcome. I think we're going to have a great conversation. And why don't you introduce a little bit more about you and the work you're doing?
Yes, thank you, Sarah Beth, and good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you might be. Yes, so who am I? I'm a former tech executive who is now an advocate for inclusive workplaces. I have written a couple books actually, but the book we'll mainly be talking about is this book, Better Allies, Everyday Actions to Create Inclusive, Engaging Workplaces. And I'm also a leadership coach. Now, very briefly, how did I get to do all of this work now? I did a big career pivot myself. I changed my professional identity about 10 years ago. Before that, I was working in tech. I used to be a software engineer. I wrote code for a living a long time ago. And over time, I did move into executive roles. And most recently, I was a vice president of engineering at Adobe. Now, during that 25 years, I noticed a problem with gender diversity in the industry. We all know about it, it's in all the news, but I noticed that disparity. And so when I was still at Adobe, I started our women's employee resource group. I started mentoring a lot of women and just advocating for gender diversity in various meetings and settings I was in. I love doing that so much, Sarah Beth, that over time, like I didn't want to be a VP of engineering anymore. I wanted
Wow.
to work with women full time, help women grow their careers, and frankly, stay in this wonderful industry that is tech, if that's where they wanted to be. So 10 years ago, this is when I did a pivot with my identity, and I became a leadership coach focusing on women who worked in tech. And I love doing that work so much. Yet and I still do it today, but I realized there was this problem I had with leadership coaching and specifically my practice focusing on women in tech, because these women who are amazing and reaching out to me for advice and learning, and we were growing together, they're great, but their companies were not inclusive. And that meant that the white men primarily were getting ahead at a faster rate than everybody else.
Mm.
And that's when I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to help my clients by not only giving them coaching, but to make their workplaces more inclusive. That set me off on a whole path of research, this topic of allyship. What are the small things, the everyday actions people can take to be more inclusive at work? That led to me starting a Twitter handle, which is called @BetterAllies, where I share these ideas. That led to me speaking about this topic and frankly getting requests to write my book. And that's why I wrote my book. And I do a lot of speaking about this topic today.
I love the evolution of that journey because I work with so many people that are going through career transitions and they also feel confused on where do I belong and fit into the workplace. Nobody understands me. I do this, but I also do this and this. And it's been awkward and sort of it goes against society's norms to jump careers or change lanes. And you've been a software engineer and a VP and now you're a leadership coach. Like those are big transformations of your professional identity. I'm just wondering if you ever felt that discomfort or like this is a big leap you're taking in becoming a different identity.
Oh, of course. Of course. A lot of imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
a lot of uncertainty. Um, I'll also share, and this is a little embarrassing, but I'll put it out there. When I was in college, my SAT scores getting into college were not very good on the English side and
Mhm.
great on the math and science, but not on the English side. I had to take a remedial writing course when I was a freshman in college, and here I am, a published author. So,
Totally.
like, there's a lot that can get in our head about how
Mhm.
we think about ourselves and so forth. I'll share with you one thing too,
Okay.
which was important to me. Maybe others feel this way too. It was important to me to retain some of my previous professional identity as I
Yes.
moved into this new role as a leadership coach, because I think it was going to help me stand out as in terms of a former VP of engineering who's now a leadership coach. But it also was such an important part of me. Like I couldn't just leave that behind.
Yes.
Yet I didn't know how to really talk about that. Like you hear me talking about it now, like I just weave it in. But at the
Mhm.
time, I was like, gosh, am I going to sound too old if I say I worked in tech for 25 years? For example, like other
Right.
things that were, again, getting in my head.
Mhm.
And so I have to tell you, Sarah Beth, I still remember I was doing like a home workout, listening to a podcast by Andreessen Horowitz, which is
Mm.
the VC firm in Silicon Valley. And they interview different founders that they've invested in and everything. So I listened to this podcast and I would hear basically tech bro after tech bro joining this podcast and saying things like, well, let me tell you what I learned about machine learning and data science based on my 2 years of being
Right.
in Silicon Valley, like something really
Uh-huh.
bold. And I'm like, "Huh." And then the next guy, the next week, some other bro would be on and say something similar. And I'm like, OMG, basically, I need to own the fact that I had 25 years of experience and I moved from that individual contributor level as a software engineer
Yeah.
up to the VP level. I need to own that. And that's why I can say today,
Mm.
this is what I came from and how that has, I've pivoted away from it.
Ah, I just want to reinforce so many important points you said. One, the vulnerability of the imposter syndrome of not believing in yourself and seeing yourself and owning it and just stepping into that confidence of what identity you are. And that's such an important thing. And then being able to translate that and communicate it back to the world so people see you the way you want to be seen. And then this idea too of weaving, you said that so eloquently that yes, of course, your leadership experience and all the years you've had in software engineering are still part of you. It's not like one happened and the next and you left them behind. They actually inform a lot of how you see the workplace and the advice you're giving as a coach. And so for me, that's the hybridity. It's the combination of all the parts into something new. And even though you say I'm a leadership coach and an ally advocate, or however you say it, it is bigger than the sum of those parts. There's so much wrapped into that, which this is why our work has so much synergy. Um, when did you first realize you were an ally? Like, was there a light bulb moment or was that gradual? Because you said you start to notice the disparity of gender inequity in the workplace. But was there a tipping point when you started to become an ally yourself?
I don't know if there was a tipping point. It was an awareness, I think, that was growing.
Hmm.
Listening to the dialogue that was starting to happen, this goes back like 15 years now,
Yeah.
around the lack of gender diversity. Going to a conference that focused on women in the tech industry
Yeah.
and hearing what programs and what people were doing to improve the gender ratio in their companies. Um, there were some eye-opening moments, I guess, but
Yeah.
I had to find my voice. I felt like I was the most senior woman in engineering at Adobe at the time, and I felt this sense of responsibility
Yes.
just growing, and that's, I think, what gave me the courage or even just the focus, the awareness that I
Yes.
needed to do this effectively.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That I think it's a lot of little moments over time that can start to accumulate and emphasize and reinforce like there's something here that needs to change. I've also heard you mention in other interviews that you noticed your privilege, like being in that position of power. And as you just said, you had a space and a platform, and why not use it for good? And this was the issue that really kind of lit you up. So I appreciate that you recognized it because not everyone does that. I'd love to shift gears and talk more about allyship. So, to become an ally, like what does that even mean? Can you explain that more?
Yes. So you mentioned privilege, and actually, I like to call it the P word because a lot of us don't like to have our privilege pointed out.
Yeah.
Um, Privilege, I think we tend to get defensive in terms of, hey, wait a second, I'm not privileged. I had to work hard to get to where I am today. And you
Yeah.
have, I mean, we all have our stories about having to put ourselves through school or pay off student debt or really lean into our careers or whatever it might be. And I
Yeah.
get it. But that's not what privilege is about. It's not saying that you didn't have to work hard to get what you have today. It's simply saying that you've got some unearned benefits for, based on the social classes that you are a part of, based on your gender and skin color and educational status and caregiving status and financial status, like how much money you have in the bank that allows you to take risks with your career. Privilege
Mhm.
has so many sort of aspects and layers to it
Yes.
that we do need to understand how we have privilege, because not everyone's got the same privilege in the workplace as we might have. And that's where allyship comes in. Once we start being aware of, I have this privilege that other people don't, are there things that I can be doing to make sure that they have a career door open for them, or just an equal shot at being able to say something in a big meeting that is going to be heard and help them be visible. There are small things that we can do once we realize not everyone feels as comfortable coming off of mute and speaking their mind, for example, in a large Zoom meeting.
Mhm.
Yeah, so understanding privilege is really the first step in
Nice.
the ally journey. And by the way, we're never done being an ally. It is an ongoing journey because there's always some more to learn about
Yes.
experiences of people who aren't like us. Um, I'm going to give another example of privilege, just briefly. I was speaking about my book at a company and being interviewed by a gentleman, and he mentioned that he was finally aware of a certain kind of privilege he had, which was the privilege of feeling safe as he
Mm.
navigated a city. And he was going on a business trip with he realized on the plane that there was a colleague of his who was a woman on that same plane. They were going to the same conference. And he said, hey, do you want to share a ride, a taxi to the hotel at when we land? And she said, oh, that would be great, except I'm not staying at the conference hotel because it was full by the time I
Mm.
got around to booking it. I'm staying across town. And he said, huh, poor you, you're going to have a lot more expense reporting to have to do, the rides, the taxi rides here and there, the ride shares. And she's like, I could care less about the extra paperwork. That's not a problem. What I have to care about is my personal safety twice a day at this
Mm.
conference, getting into a stranger's car and hoping I'm going to get to the other end, and vice versa at the end of the day. That's what I'm worried
Oof.
about. That was a bit of an aha moment for this man. He said, I had never, just didn't even think about that. So what did he do? As an ally, he took two actions. One, in the immediate, he swapped hotel rooms with her. So he brought
Oh,
her to the conference hotel and said, I want her to have my room. And then he took her room at the other place. Really nice,
oh.
right? But
Yeah.
he also contacted the conference organizers and said, next year at this conference, can we have kind of some reserved hotel rooms for women and
Mm.
other people who are underrepresented who might be concerned about personal safety at the conference hotel, to have them have priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal that he was so active and didn't and took it seriously. He didn't just dismiss and go, "Oh, that's too bad. Like, good
Yeah.
luck."
Yeah.
Um, that really is an important moment. Just I love how you frame that. Becoming an ally is sort of like I love that you frame it as a journey. And it's also something that, like, I think people say they're an ally, but when you look at their actions, are they really? So, what is some of that guidance you give people in those early days where it's like not just enough to say, yeah, of course I'm an ally, I stand up for women all the time, but like helping them actually shift their behavior too?
Yeah. Um, Shifting behavior, small changes to our habits. It's like this is
Mhm.
what this is all about. I'm a firm believer. You don't have to know it all. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to become an expert in diversity or inclusion. And you don't have to have those words on your business card or in your job title to make a difference. I'm a huge believer in pick one thing to do differently and start doing that.
Yeah.
And in my book, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of these examples of
Mm.
what are some of the small things we can do. A classic one, and this probably will resonate to people listening, is what's called office housework. Office
Oh,
housework are the things that need to get done around an office or in a meeting that are important to the health of the organization or that team, but they're no one's job. So,
mm.
classic example, taking notes at the meeting. Like,
Yes.
it's no one's job to take the
I've been there.
notes. Or who can order food before, this lunch meeting, or set up the follow-up meeting, or who can DM all the people who are missing that we need to have in this meeting. Like, these
Yeah.
things need to get done. They're kind of these housework tasks, but they tend to fall on women, and especially women of color's shoulders more
Yes.
than white males. And so, as an ally, notice this is happening, look out for it, and then offer to do it yourself, or set up rotations where, if it's a standing meeting monthly or weekly,
Yeah.
that everyone gets to take a turn.
I
So,
love the rotation idea.
yeah, yeah. Okay, another quick story. I know we have
Yeah.
so little time here, but quick story here. Rotations, cautionary tale. I was doing a consulting project for a Silicon Valley company a few years ago, and I was attending a standing monthly meeting for their Women in Tech Steering Committee, and we were talking about strategy.
Okay.
Well, they had a best practice of rotations for this Women in Tech Steering Committee monthly. They would change off who was taking the notes. So the meeting I was at, the organizer looked at her laptop and looked through it, like whose turn it is to take the notes. Well, it was Brian's turn.
Okay.
Brian was the one male ally on the steering committee for Women in Tech, right?
Okay.
And then you probably know where this is going. Brian says, I'm not that good at taking notes. I think someone else should
I
do it.
have heard that.
And I was floored because I know about all this research that women tend to be asked to do more of this than men. And so I don't know, Sarah, but I often, like, I'm falling asleep at night and I'm replaying the day's events and I think of what I
Mhm.
should have said in the moment. Maybe you do this too. But this day, good news, I know just what to say in the moment. And I said, hey, Brian, practice makes perfect. And
I
this is
love
the
it.
perfect place to practice.
Yes.
Yes, he took the notes. They were fine. So my cautionary tale here is if you do set up rotations, please hold people accountable.
I love that. That is just a great illustration because I kind of wanted to play the devil's advocate. I've heard this women as the note taker scenario a few times. And I think there's also like I've worked in a lot of nonprofits and a lot of education organizations, and so those tend to be more female dominated, at least in the administrative and like mid management levels. And then it's usually senior level people that have more male representation or men represented. And I've noticed even in the meetings with a lot of women, we sort of move into a hierarchical role. It's like the younger professionals be the note takers and the senior staff isn't. So I'm wondering, even amongst women, are there strategies or things that you've seen or suggested?
Um, so the same thing applies, I think, regardless of the
Mhm.
gender we're talking about. And as more senior women in a meeting, yeah, it's nice if someone else will do that instead of me having to do it. Yet that puts them in a subservient role to everybody else. That prevents them from making sort of the killer points that they might otherwise make
Yeah.
in a meeting. That saddles them with busy work.
Mhm.
And that's not fair to their careers. Like, if I want people in my staff, if I had an organization, which I'm now a solopreneur, so it's just me, but thinking back on my tech career, the best thing a leader can do is make sure that their talent is learning and growing so that they
Yes,
themselves, me, I can take on new responsibilities too and grow my career.
sure.
So it's in our best interest to make sure that even the more junior people are showing up like they should at the meeting and not being the subservient person for everybody else's needs.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance when you're trying to open space for voices and have that equity because someone who is young might still have a great idea to contribute, but there's work that has to get done and people need to jump in and do it. And how do you weight that and have a fair environment? So I know there's more complexity there. I would love to shift to into this notion of the employee, the worker. because we've talked about the allies a little bit, and we'll probably come back more into that. But people have visible and invisible identities, right? And going back to your story of the woman sharing the taxi ride with the gentleman, she had to advocate for herself and say, actually, I feel unsafe. Here's what I'm about to experience by being in this different hotel. If she had not said that statement, it would have been an invisible part of her experience. He would not have known any different. So, how do you talk to people? And this is part of the work I do, right? Is if people want to be seen and respected and feel they're being valued, they have to talk about who they are. They can't just expect, because of your job title, people understand you. So, do you have any advice, or do you come across this too, of helping people talk about themselves so allies can stand up?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. This is a theme in my coaching practice.
Mm,
The theme, I'll just put a label on it. It's visibility.
yes.
But let me share another story.
Okay.
I had a coaching client who she was a senior director of engineering, fabulous person, a lot of responsibility at her company, one level below the VP level. Like it was a lot of responsibility. And she was working on her self-appraisal for the year of all the things she and her team accomplished. And she said, Karen, will you take a look at it? I'm like, sure. She sent over 4 or 5 pages of dense bullets of all the work they'd done. And it was
Wow.
impressive, Sarah Beth. It was
Yeah.
really impressive. But I was like, what? So let's talk about this. What is the
Mm,
story you want to be telling with this self appraisal? She's like, well, I got all the stuff done. I'm like, no, no, no. Your manager is a busy person too. You want to give this to your manager, and you want your manager to be able to sit in another meeting with senior leadership and advocate for you to get a promotion. What is the story you want him, and it was a him,
mm,
what is the story you want him to be telling about you? What is the story of the impact you had on the business? How
yeah.
can we group these 4 or 5 pages of dense bullets into maybe a handful, maybe 3 significant things that you did to impact the business? You've got all the data to back it up. What is the story you want to share? So we shifted those gears to be kind of, thinking about what
Yes.
are the highlights. And put that in words, put that in the self-appraisal, put that in basically the presentation of it, the gift she was giving her manager of how she wanted him to talk about her.
Ah, this synthesis makes so much sense to me. I've been in that position. I was doing my performance evaluation for the year, and I was probably similar to your client. I had 4 pages of notes of really just an immense amount of work I'd done that year that I was proud of. And the grouping of it, which luckily I did do some of that. I had like, here was the big project, and then here are all the details I was focused on. But I love how you role reversed for her so she could walk in the shoes of her manager
Mhm.
and tell the story more succinctly with all of that impact. And the details were probably great for her own self knowledge to reflect on and see. Because as workers, we kind of take it for granted, and the year goes by and we're like, oh my God, what did I do? But at the end of the day, you need to make it easy, succinct, really showcase your value, find those biggest bullet points and group them. I love that into the strongest talking points about why you're exceptional. And I think the identity piece too is like, you have this job title, but what are all the different hats you wear and how do they fit together? So you're great at relationship building, you're a good connector, you've managed new partnerships. Okay, those are different professional identities. Maybe even you bring in some of your inclusive language. And then what is the picture? How do they weave together? Kind of coming back to that idea of hybridity.
Yeah.
I really appreciate how you coached her. Did that help her? What was her response?
Yeah, no, it was eye-opening, I'd
Yeah.
say. She hadn't really thought about it that way
Mhm.
before. So yes, yeah, I think it was effective, definitely. Um, I'll also say another part of this visibility conversation I have with a lot of the women I coach is that, you know, okay, so you're a good, project manager, you're a good marketing leader, whatever. What
Yeah.
makes you different than everybody else who has the same
Yes.
job title at your company or out there in the industry? And
Yes.
that's a little uncomfortable. It's
Hmm.
uncomfortable trying to start thinking about because it's kind of digging into what we value about ourselves and our bragging rights almost. And we, especially as women, are taught this is not a good thing to do. We can't we shouldn't be bragging on our own behalf. But in private and one-on-one coaching, I try to draw that out and get them to realize that there is something that makes them unique. That's part of their personal brand that they bring to work every day. It's a promise that they make with their coworkers, with their company, with their organization, a promise that they make. I'm going to show up like this every day and do my work in this way.
Yes.
And they keep it over and over again. And once you find that identity, that small nugget, which is actually really powerful, not just small, then people know how they can show up differently, talk about themselves differently, point out when they're doing it. You know me, I'm always going to look for a cost saving measure. So here's my question. Like, you can weave it into your everyday conversation and help other people see it in you.
Karen, that's almost identical to the kind of work I do with individuals as well, because we don't see it in ourselves. I know there's a few people watching right now who this is exactly where we started when they met me and chose to work with me. And I do think as women, the bragging rights are really hard. It is so hard to say, like, pat on the back, I did this thing. They're like, oh, you mean that like $13 million renovation project I helped with? Like that was just a project. It's like, no, wait a minute. Did you hear the number you just said? And like, not a lot of people work on things. Like, let's talk about that more. And the act of having you in their life or me or someone else to sit across from them and kind of reflect the power of what they're doing, that they're just not able to like process whatever, I don't know, bias we have in our brain that blocks us from seeing it, but it's real. And having a mirror is truly the biggest trick I've seen to like open people up of realizing their worth. That's huge. I know we're getting close to the top of our talk today. We've covered a ton. I want to just bring up one final thing. Maybe it's a little bit of like things we take for granted that we're doing that aren't being a supportive ally. So referencing a conversation you and I had previously, I mentioned I was working with a group of female founders and I was just discussing it with you. And you said, Sarah Beth, actually, there's a better way of saying this that's more appropriate, which is women founders. So first of all, I just really appreciated that you helped me see the language I'm using just naturally and what's more appropriate these days. So why is that a better term? Let's just start there.
Yeah. And I must admit, maybe you're here too. Growing up, I learned female was an adjective to describe somebody and woman was the noun. But I've since learned that female is literally, it's the based on our chromosomes, what we are born with, our sex at birth. And people who have transitioned to be a woman don't have those same chromosomes. They are not female officially, but they are women because they have transitioned to women. So women is more of an identity that, not more of, it is an identity that we can have. And so to be inclusive of trans women as well as females, we can just use the term women now, and we can use that as an adjective and as a noun. Yeah.
That's really helpful. And the fact that people are using pronouns and there's just more cultural clues to help us all use more appropriate language.
Yeah. And it's hard to unlearn these old habits, but it's something like I pay attention to this now. I collect these examples. I'm doing my best to learn and stay abreast of it all. It's a lot of our language it always shifts. It always has. And right now, a lot of it is around being more inclusive.
Absolutely. I think that is another reason I'm so drawn to this work on hybrid professional identity, because of the binary nature of expert or generalist, the either or. We need more space for fluidity, for intersectionality within professional identity. Intersectionality is so important to us as humans, to the conversations of DE&I in the workplace. And there's levels of intersectionality within just the work we do. And we're not seeing that. Without this language, we're all sort of stuck in processing and changing these old ways.
Yeah. Wow.
So, good stuff.
Powerful.
So good. Karen, where can people find you if they want to learn more tips about being a better ally? I know you have a great newsletter that is very action-oriented.
Thank you. Yeah, so betterallies.com is the website with my book and my newsletter and other resources. In my newsletter, just quickly, it's called 5 Ally Actions. I send it out every Friday, and it's basically things I've learned during the week some mistakes I've made
Mm.
on my journey to be a better ally. And I think it's a great way for people to get a little drip of idea
Yeah.
and inspiration through, every week, that they can start thinking about, how could I apply that and be a better ally?
It's so helpful. And I love how you keep it real world, relevant, your own experience, things you're reading about, because who doesn't want 5 tips to keep improving their own allyship? Follow Karen as well, Better Allies on Twitter. She's really active over there and on LinkedIn. I've gained a great amount of information, and it's just all these little things like female founder, women founders, like stuff I don't even realize I'm doing. And we're all trying to become better. So thank you. I just know you have so much to share, and this was a great snapshot for today. And if people want to keep following me, come to morethanmytitle.com. Again, a lot of resources on being a hybrid professional and how to navigate your own professional identity career transitions. Karen, have a great rest of your day. And I know we will see each other sometime in the future.
Thank you so much, Sarah Beth. Bye bye.
Bye.